So alternative drive controls. Now I haven't gone into a huge amount of depth here. I've kind of touched on some of the basic principles at all, and only because across our 3 chairs we've got 3 sets of electronics and they're all done slightly differently. Also the options are endless in terms of what you might do. Again, coming back to our client goals, what do they want to do, where do they want to go? What can be really tricky is I'd love to be able to do this and it doesn't fit so well with ministry funding, or I can do this in this environment but I need another solution for another environment, which is where things start getting tricky. But again, narrowing down what are we trying to do and where are we trying to drive.
Does the client actually want to do this? And I've got bogged down before with all sorts of alternative controls, and the client will then say, actually, I'm quite happy to be pushed. I've done my driving now, it's getting too hard for me. I don't want to look like this with all this head array around me. Just push me.
I guess the reference here is with MND, and unfortunately some of these people progress faster than we can keep up with, in which case it's trying to work with alternative controls can be a challenge, because you get one solution that works now, 2 weeks later, no, not so much. And there are some systems more versatile than others, or what you might get for trial might vary, going, I don't know what this person's going to be like. One thing to check first is that the seating is obviously sorted and that the person needs to have a stable position in the chair, particularly if you're using switching. So if the seating's not ideal or they're struggling to maintain a good position in the chair. So typically some of our people with high tone, that the cushion's kind of had its day and it needs to be reviewed and they're sliding forward on the seat, that it's best to get that sorted before you look at this. So what movement have they got, what can they consistently do, and that's just keeping the back in mind about what you've got to work with. Coming back to MND, like we mentioned earlier, is about that often these people are driving and then they lose that ability and we assume they want to keep going. It's actually confirming that whether or not they do want to continue driving. Strangely, I've had a run of people lately that they've lost use of their hands and they've actually opted for a manual tilt and space, and the reason being is they're at home with their spouse, and the benefits or what they can do with the manual chair actually outweighs it's easier to get through the house. For one of them, it meant that the husband can lift her into the car, lift the chair into the car, and go watch your kids play sport. So for them, the manual chair made more sense. So it's just confirming this is what you want to do. For some of our rapidly deteriorating MNDs, sort of speech and swallow and respiratory functions are a concern, and if they're rapidly going downhill, that's the biggest stress. So sometimes we need to let those issues be sorted before we come back in with alternative power or alternative access power, and actually checking you're okay, you've got the time and the energy to put into achieving this. And for some people they're like, yep, bring it on. Others are actually, things are very unstable at the moment, perhaps we need to come back to it. So, and MND, they're all different. We get some that they gradually go downhill and we gradually adapt as they go and they keep going, and there's others that, yeah, like I said, we end up chasing them and never catch them. Before looking at some of our other options, is actually coming back to the standard controllers. The chairs with expandable electronics, so the likes of our Q-Logic and Mark 6 and RNet, there's a lot of options you can do simply with the controller. Adjusting joystick throw is how far the person needs to be able to move the joystick to get the chair to drive. So typically if you go fully forward, that's full speed, done. You can adjust actually how far you need to move the controller to get the chair moving at what speed. So this is all programmable. So for people who are losing some strength but still have reasonable function, it might be a case of just reprogramming the chair, particularly in the short term if that's keep them going. For some who struggle to access the buttons on the controller, is that you can rotate the controller. And for some, they might end up using the attendant control, which is 2 easy to reach buttons, and you can angle it so that they can reach the buttons. And if this is a person who's losing that ability to push the joystick forward, you can change it so that if you bring the joystick back, that's forward, or if they've got that in, so moving that internal rotation, again, you can move that to forward and then reorientate your directions from there. The other time that can be really useful is if you do give the client the alternative, the attendant controller, is you can mount the main controller on the back and swing it around so it tucks in behind the back canes. So again, that's another nice way of actually changing your direction, so you can still drive normally. So if you push the joystick towards the front of the chair will move forward. But these are some easy options. Like I said, it might be you've got someone who's gradually deteriorating and this is a nice first step, or it can be something to tide you over until you look at other options.
And that's when your technicians and your company reps are brilliant to pick your guys' brains and say, this is what I'm trying to do, how can I do it?
There's also the option of 3-directional driving, and that, now I've never actually used this, but Nigel was filling me in, around your forward and reverse can actually be the same way. So you've got left, right and forward, and then you can either, with your mode switch to bring forward to then become reverse, much like your 3-switch driving. So same principles, but you're using it through a controller. So your drive types, and this is just briefly touching on proportional, which is obviously your standard joystick, and that the further forward you move your controller, the faster the chair goes. To non-proportional in that, and typically whether it's with a stitch, you hit the switch, the chair is programmed to accelerate at a certain pace, you hit that speed, you stay there. So it's set functions, and you increase your speed by moving through your mode functions. Yeah. So just thinking of how that chair might drive, and like I said, you typically see your proportional with your joystick. You can do it with proximity switches, which I'll come back to later. And yeah, non-proportional is that you hit a button and you move. So there's no acceleration other than what's programmed into the chair. Mini joystick, something I think that can be overlooked. And obviously it's a nice option that you don't need a lot of strength or force to move the controller. For those of us who have lots of movement, they can be a bit challenging to drive. But for those who have very little, it can be a nice thing. And mounting wise, in terms of where you need to put your controller, so whether you've got someone whose hand sits here, that you can get the controller mounted here. And it's discussing with your suppliers about what this might look like and the logistics of doing this. So in terms of if the person needs to transfer out, what's going to happen to the controller. So can be set up for chin control, so whether or not you use some mounting that positions the control at the chin, or whether or not you're using a bib style mounting. In both Stealth and ASL I've got a number of options. So mechanical switches being like a buddy button. These come in all shapes, sizes. How much force you need to activate the switch can vary. A1 wheelchairs actually have, I think they call it the switch box, and they've got 3 of them, and there's literally a box full of switches. Often the SLTs work with these a lot with kids if they're using them for communication devices. The beauty of these is I don't know if you can hear it click, so you know when you've hit the switch you can hear it, okay? Sieve and Puff is actually a type of mechanical switch, although for driving it does come with its own program versus some of the other ones. This compares to proximity switches, which capacitive switches, which commonly are in head array. So basically it's like a mushroom of, what would you call it, Steve? Space. I can see Steve's raising her hand on. And basically as you get up to it, it's picked up that your hand's near it, and it picks up the capacitive forces of your skin and activates it. When you activate these switches you can't hear it, so you only know that you've activated it because the chair's going to do something, or you might hear the motors click. You can set up a proportional type control with it, and that the closer you get to it, obviously the more signal it's picking up, and it can make the chair go faster. It's not a function I've used, but it's something that might be worth knowing about. And again, how you mount these is you're limited by your imagination and what the suppliers can pull off. Fibre optic is, I'm not sure you can see these 4 things. Basically you have fibre optic beams come up. This is one example that it's set up with a tray. You can buy the units on their own. These are not low cost solutions, but in saying that, if you've got someone with very little movement, it might be all that you've got. And so basically you can set them so that if the beam comes up, if you break the beam, it activates the switch. But I believe you can also do the reverse, in that if you got your finger out and you move your finger away, that can also activate the switch. So I've never used it in a tray format like this, but I can see how a single switch would be really useful. But in saying that, you can drive with a couple of fingers, and all 4 fingers fit. You've got some of the little movement, it's potential they could be driving. So
I think the one thing to remember with these and with the mini switches and things like that, Rachel's talked about you can use it with just the tiniest bit of movement. The most important thing about that tiniest little movement is it needs to be consistent. So they need to have control over what they've got.
Head array you can have it's effectively 3 or 5 switch driving, but it's mounted on a headrest. I know in the past for kids, when you're exploring the actual concept of power, is actually you can have a headrest and simply use some buddy-butted switches, set it up with, it's often good to start with even one switch. They activate the switch, they know what the chair's going to do, and they can activate it and then not activate it. And then you can increase the number of switches as they gain competence with doing that. So it might be that you move to then forward and then one turn and then two turns. The link driving, I think this is fairly new here. We've got the Q6 just set up with it, and basically you have two buttons. If you hit the right button, you go right. If you hit the left button, you go left. Hit both together, you go forward, which is actually a nice instinctive way of driving and quite a nice setup. So currently it's set up through iDrive, but certainly get in and have a go. I actually quite like this driving style. It's something nice and easy. Scanning, which has been around for a long time with single switch, which if you've got one switch point and that's all you've got, then it's better than nothing. But it is slow, so a lot of people will say that it's quite frustrating trying to get around. Sip and puff I haven't used, and by all means have a chat to our suppliers about that one. And then simply your free buttons in terms of you might mount them on a tray, or you might have some assortment of options with your 2, 3, 4, 5 options depending on how you program your chair. So if you've got less switches, you do need to get creative about how you're going to access your on-off mode, and this is when you're looking at your double tapping and your in programming the speed at which you need to do that double tap and that sustained hold, which if you've got someone who's cognitively able might manage that, but it can be very frustrating for those who struggle to learn it. So you've got the trade-off, you can have lots of switch points and you have switches doing different things, or you have less switches but the switches are having to do more things. Piecing together your multiple functions and your alternative access is tricky. Because again, when you're scripting up a chair and you can say, oh, they need this, they need this, and they need this, and oh, they need to do that too, and actually, what's the end result like? And so, like I said before, for some people, less is more, but in saying that, there are people out there who are managing these chairs. There are chairs set up out there which, certainly with practice, you can learn, but it's just that nice of putting it together and choosing what are the most essential functions depending on what your client can do. And just that comment again about care of use with the use of recliner head position is important. So the likes of head array. I also had a comment with the stand-up chairs that head position also moves, so you've got to get creative around that with head array. So it can be done, you just need to problem solve what that might look like.